Hello, I'm Paul Miles, and this is my wife Lena. We're with Grace Abroad Ministries, and we do translation, teaching, and outreach in Ukraine. A lot of people don't understand just how complicated the translation process is, so we've decided to make a short video to give you an overview of what all is involved. The main issue in all of this is relationships. You have to have a relationship with everybody, with the translator, with the print shop people, with the publishers, the typesetters, everybody. Problems are going to occur. There's going to be something that comes up that you weren't expecting. And if you have good relationships with the right people, it really makes resolving these issues a lot easier. So the first step in all of this is you have to choose a book that you want to translate. And our criteria are essentially, first we want a book that answers a question that Ukrainians are asking. So it needs to be relevant to the issues at hand. We also want it to be written by an author who has good theology, whom we can endorse. Because perhaps the book is good, but we want the Ukrainians to be able to look into the author further and not come across some strange theology elsewhere. And also it's helpful if the publisher or whoever it is that has the rights to the books is easy to work with, so that we can work out a good deal for translation. Our most recent translation projects that we've launched are good examples of these criteria. We have Thomas, Hero of the Faith, by Lucas Kitchen, which we're translating into Ukrainian, and Salvation and Discipleship by the same author, which we're translating into Russian. Both of these books answer important theological questions. The first one is Salvation and Discipleship. It discusses the difference between salvation by grace through faith and discipleship through, in part, of our works. A lot of people in Ukraine are teaching salvation through lordship or salvation through discipleship, which is unique from the gospel taught in the Bible. So this book is very helpful because it addresses an urgent need in Ukrainian theology, and it does so very well. This is another great book by the same author, Thomas, Hero of the Faith. It talks about doubt, which is something that every Christian struggles with around the world. I like how Lucas puts it, if you have doubt, then speak out. So it's essentially apologetic in nature, and it helps you deal with the questions that you might be struggling in your faith. So they're relevant topics, both written by Lucas Kitchen. Lucas has some great theology out there. He's actually known around the world because of his apologetics videos that he's done that have gone viral and very popular. So good books, good topic, good author. And as for the rights, it's actually the author himself who owns the rights to the books. He works with 289 Design, which is another good ministry, by the way. And so, easy to work with him. Lucas and I, we've got a good relationships. We're good friends. He's even on our board. So, very easy to work with. He's a guy that has a passion for getting the message out into different languages. So, these books are ideal candidates. So once we decide on a book that we'd like to translate, then we approach the board with the translation proposal. You say, this is the book that we're wanting to do. Here's a tentative budget for how much it'll cost. For that, you have to think about paying the translator, the proofreaders, the typesetters, printing the book, buying the little barcode that you put on the back of the book. A lot of little details that you got to work out and figure out a general budget. Present that to the board. If they say, yes, this is a great idea, move forward, then we approach the publisher or whoever it is that owns the rights to the books. And we say, here's what we'd like to do. We'd like to translate this book into this language. And then if they agree, then we take the next step and we approach a translator about working with the particular text. And we look for someone that's within our price range. We might have to adjust the budget a little bit if they want more compensation, but we work that out. And then once we get all that settled, we can send them a file, a Word file with all the text that they can work with. And then we begin raising the funds to cover all the translation costs. And every penny that we raise for a translation project goes to that particular translation project. Then as we're raising the funds, then the magic starts to happen with the actual translation of the text, and that's Lena's specialty.
Yes, I actually do the translation, not all of it, but some of the projects I translate, and some of the books we outsource to other translators. And finding a good translator is a trick of its own. It's tricky because you need a person who understands theology, not just English, and also can put it into good target language, either Russian or Ukrainian. And I usually translate something, and then we have other people translating for us, so our projects don't last forever. And this part takes a lot of time. It's usually months. Depends on the size of the book, but it usually takes a couple or a few months before the translation's over, because translator needs to go over the whole text again and again to make sure he's happy with the result. And I try to be available for the translators who work for us if they have any questions about theological terms, or just some authors have their own personal terms that are tricky for translation. And so I work with them and help them to do their work as good as they can. And when the text is done and translation's ready, the text goes to proofreaders. These are people who work with the finished translation, and they go through the text and they look for grammatical mistakes or punctuations or things like that. So they go through the whole text again, and then they come back to us and they give their feedback and just tell us their corrections that they think that need to be done. So that's the actual work with the text.
And another fun part of the process is designing a book cover that's appropriate for the title. So for example, this one is The Gospel Under Siege. So we put a cool looking catapult on the front. The Hungry Inherit is another one. It's got kind of a story feel to it, so we put a minimalistic design with a fork and a knife playing off of the hungry. Whereas Absolutely Free has a bit more of an academic feel, so we gave it this more academic appeal on the front, sort of a light cover with a little coin from the old temple system. Translate a few words on the back, which were on the original book covers and endorsements. We put a little mark on the back as well in the American edition. We've actually got these available now. Can't tell the difference much from a distance, but this one was printed in America, so it's available to any Ukrainian speakers in America that's interested. And this is one that we printed in Ukraine. So that's a fun part. Also, we have to talk to a typesetter. Typesetter is the person that decides on the inside what the text will look like. So do we have a little page number at the bottom, or does it go to the top? Do we put a title on this side, chapter on that side? Got to figure out what fonts to use for footnotes and for block quotes and everything. There really is an art. So we send it to the typesetter, and they typeset it, send us back a PDF that's ready to print. But first, what we've learned is you want to go through the PDF and actually proofread it to make sure that no pages got duplicated, or make sure that no paragraphs were removed. So it goes through a final typeset proofreading. Then we take the book cover and we take the contents and we go to a print shop. And we've worked with several print shops around Ukraine, but we finally found one that we really like. We built a great relationship with these guys. And I'll go up there and sit down in the office and have a little chit-chat with the gentlemen that work there. And we'll talk about pricing, figure out a good if you change the cover or the weight of the paper, it affects price. So we try to get a good quality book at a good price. And then the more you print, the less each copy costs. So we work with different numbers and figure out the perfect match for our budget for getting the number of books that we want. And then we print them. Now, when we print them, we send the books first to some contacts that we have in 3 different cities in Ukraine. The first is Dnipro. Used to be called Dnipropetrovsk. Now it's called Dnipro, which is unfortunate because I worked really hard to learn how to say Dnipropetrovsk, and now I'm not able to show it off. So it goes to Dnipro. Dnipro is where Lena is from originally. It's sort of eastern Ukraine. They speak a lot more Russian out there. And another city that we'll send to initially is Kiev. Lena and I lived in Kiev when we met and got married, and we lived there for a couple of years, so we have some good contacts, ministry contacts and churches out there that we know. And we send another batch to Lviv, which is where we currently live and serve. And it's Western Ukraine, so more of a Ukrainian-speaking country. Now, depending on the book that we're doing, if it's a book in Russian, then we might send more in to Dnipro than we would in Lviv. And if it's more Ukrainian-speaking, we might emphasize Lviv more. Each situation is a little bit different, so we kind of make a good balance on that front. And then we start distributing the books from those 3 cities. So for example, in Lviv, a bunch of books will come in, and we'll give them to some of our friends and contacts, people that are interested in reading the books for themselves, people that are organizing churches and different church leaders around that we know personally. And we'll send the books to them and give it to them personally. And then some of them will come back and say, man, that was a really good book. I have a friend that I'd like to give a copy to. Do you mind if I give him a copy? And we'll say, sure, give him a copy for his friend. Or someone else might come back and say, hey, there's a group that meets in my village. Do you mind if I send 20 copies to my village? And we'll say, sure, go for it. And so just like that, the distribution becomes organic, and the vast majority of the books that we printed last year in Ukraine ended up in the hands of people whom we've never met personally, but have connections with others who are like-minded and that are able to answer questions, many of whom we do know personally. So this method of distribution so far has been quite effective. We've even donated a couple of copies to bookstores, both Christian bookstores and secular, because bookstores are interested in selling books and distributing books, and we're interested in having our books distributed. So it's a good partnership. So far, we haven't asked for any profit or anything from them yet. We just consider this to be a cost that's worth taking to get the word out. So it's an effective measure of getting the word out there. Of course, we do translation, teaching, and outreach. Translation is really just a tool for the teaching and outreach that goes on out there. So we're excited about getting back to Ukraine here in a couple of months, where we can use the books that we have translated and that we are translating and use them in teaching atmospheres to train up Ukrainians to reach out to the unbelieving world around them. So we appreciate your interest in our work and ministry. That is a simplistic overview of how the translation and distribution side of our work works. Thank you much for watching.
Thank you.